Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead, where today we are going to follow up on our 50-pound bag of onions. We made a video a couple of weeks ago on what do we do with 50 pounds of onions. And you may remember that we put about 35 of these, and these are great big onions, nice beautiful onions, this season's onions that we got at our restaurant store. And we put 35 of them in 5 bags, 7 onions apiece, and those are now out in the garage in our food storage area, and they will overwinter there. Then we slice some onions into onion rings, which I don't have any onions cut in rings in our food storage at all. I have plenty of diced onions, but I don't have the rings. And so we cut several, and we freeze dried some, 4 trays, and it came out to be these 4 jars. And then 7 trays right here in this one of dehydrated onions. And you will notice quite a difference in color and also in size. To dehydrate these, they turned a little bit brown. The brown was from the heat and the cooking rather than oxidation. These freeze-dried ones are completely white, and they still have the very same size in terms of the thickness of the rings that we did when we started. Well, we're going to quickly rehydrate a sample of each type so that we can sort of tell how we might use these. Ooh, these feel so good. So I have each of these bowls filled with the hottest water I can get out of the tap. So we'll see how the rehydration goes with these. Usually freeze-dried go very fast. Notice that they're floating and the other ones are sinking. All right, so we'll let these rehydrate for a few minutes and we will see how they do. Meanwhile, these are all of the onions that we have left. And today we are going to caramelize these onions, and then we will do another split between the dehydrator and the freeze dryer to see how caramelized onions do. I'm so excited about doing these caramelized onions. You know, I made a plea for all of you, if you have a great way to keep yourself from crying when you do onions, please let me know. And boy, did we get a lot of good suggestions. And I think I tried pretty much everything, from candles to a match in my mouth to wetting the knife in cold water, to keeping my mouth open, all the different things that were suggested. And sadly, I cried my way through every one of them. But Jim got me this pair of goggles from the hardware store. They are safety goggles. They're quite pliable. And when I put those on like this, they fasten fairly tightly around my eyes. I had no trouble at all. So here's what I'm going to be doing with these onions, if you can stand to look at me with my goggles on. I have peeled all of them. I have my mandolin set on 1/4-inch size slices, and I'm going to get my safety gloves. So most of these are within the width that will go down here just fine. So I start off using my hand and get it down to a reasonable length, and then I put the safety thing on and finish it off. And have all of these lovely sliced onions right here. No tears. Yay! And we're going for about 8 cups of onions. This is an 8-cup measure right here. So I'm going to just put these in here. I think it's going to take about 4 onions per batch. We're going to cook them in batches of 8 cups of onions. And I'm not going to do them in the slow cooker. If you watched our video on how to make French onion soup in the slow cooker, we turned out a fabulous batch of caramelized onions. It took 6 hours. I don't have 6 hours today, so I'm just going to do it over the stove and on low heat, and we'll have about 3 pots going at the same time. So I'm going to get this first batch done and ready for us to get going on the caramelization, and then when I come back, I'll show you what we're going to do to caramelize the onions. All right, so let's check our onions before we start this next step. Freeze-dried onions are completely rehydrated. They are a little bit soggy. They have a little bit of crunch to it, but you know, they're not like the onions that we started out with. But they would be fine to do fried onions with, or any one of a number of things. The dehydrated ones are not rehydrated. They're still absorbing water. They're still quite stiff. So we'll keep those going. Okay, now for the next step here. I've melted a quarter of a cup of butter here. I have a 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper I'm going to be putting in. I'm going to stir this around. Drop our 8 cups of onions in. And I'm going to stir the onions around, see if I can get them coated with that mixture. And you can see that it is working. Little pepper flakes on the onions. And the onion rings that are still solid, that haven't come apart yet, they'll come apart during the cooking, so I'm not concerned about that. And then onto this pile of onions, I'm going to drop a bay leaf, 2 pieces of a bay leaf. And I just harvested what is probably the last of our fresh thyme from outside, right on the top, and we're going to leave it right on the top. And then I'm going to put the lid on and put it over on the stove on low, low to medium low, and we're going to let this start to work. As we get our batches going, we'll bring you back from time to time to show you how they are progressing. Meanwhile, I'm going to get back to my job of slicing onions without tears. We are about a half an hour into the project. Both of these onions have reconstituted. I have already shown you the freeze-dried, and they're pretty, a little bit soggy. These have turned out great, but they are also soggy. Just do a quick taste. They have a little bit of a bite to them as well. So either way would work perfectly well. The onions would be suitable not for doing the type of breaded onion rings that you get in a restaurant, but if you wanted some fried onions on the side, they would be perfect for that. And you could even reconstitute them while you fry them if you want, by putting a little bit of liquid in the pan, or do it ahead of time, either one. So I'm really glad that we have that many onions now in rings, which will increase the versatility of what we can do in our recipes. Now, as for the caramelized onions, I just finished with this one. My little goggles that Jim got me are just fantastic, except they leave a red mark right here, and they mess up my hair, you know. But then,
wow.
I know. I'm so vain.
Yes.
At least I didn't shed a tear, and that is fantastic.
That's what's important.
It is what is important. So this is what they look like when they first start off. I leave the lid on to kind of get things going a little bit. There is some, let me push this forward so Jim can get a better picture of it. There is some liquid in the bottom right here, and we really don't want any liquid in the bottom. So now that they are started, I'm going to probably leave this lid off. I already have left the other ones off. So let's go take a look at the other ones, especially the ones that have been going for almost the full time. So come on back over here. So this was the first one that I put on the pan, on the heat, and there's still liquid in the bottom, but you see that the onions have relaxed a whole lot, what we like to see. There's our thyme. The kitchen is smelling fantastic. The thyme aroma really is, it just smells luscious. And so these are coming along nicely. They're not browning at all, but they will. This was the next group that went in, so you can see they're just a little bit farther behind. They're not quite as wilted down. And this was the third batch that went in, and so it has liquid on the bottom as well. And I'm actually going to put the lid back on this one for a little bit. So We will be bringing you back. This is going to take an hour or more to get these onions caramelized and ready to go in either the dehydrator or the freeze dryer. We have 2 batches that are ready to go, and not surprisingly enough, they are the 2 that are in the frying pans. This one finished first, which was the last one to go on the heat, and it has done just beautifully. Look at these lovely caramelized onions. They're just great. And let me get a taste here. Caramelized onions are supposed to take on a sweeter taste. A lot of times you can start with sweet onions. We didn't have that option. And that's exactly what has happened here. The sugars come to the surface and create this lovely little, it's like a sauce on the bottom. Once everything evaporates, you can look in here and see all of this little boily stuff right here is part of the sugar that has crystallized on the onions themselves. And so these are wonderful caramelized onions. So I'm going to bring them out, spread them out on this freeze drying tray. And here is the thyme that I'm going to remove. Got it by the string there. And there's the bay leaf. I'm going to spread these pretty thin because I want some for the dehydrator too. We'll do at least 1 tray, maybe 2 in the dehydrator. And there's no way that we're going to be able to untangle these, just no way at all. And I could make these a lot, another string of thyme that got loose. There's no way that I would even want to try to untangle these. So they're going to dry and they're going to get crispy, and we'll just break them off and take them the way they are. So that's about 1 tray for the freeze dryer. So here is a tray from the dehydrator. Get the bay leaf out. These are beautiful. I want to spread these very thin so it won't take 3 days to dry. Okay, you can see how they're going to look before they have been dried on both the freeze dryer and the dehydrator trays. So we're going to continue with this project until we get all the trays ready to go. And then I think we're going to just go ahead and put them in, and we'll come back when they are completely finished. So it'll be a couple of days, and we will see you then. Good morning. Here we are a couple of days later, and these are the results of our freeze drying and dehydrating our caramelized onions. These 2 tall jars, the 2-quart jars, are from the freeze dryer, and it was 4 trays, and this was 2 trays of caramelized onions in the dehydrator. I don't think that I will be, generally speaking, rehydrating these. Mostly I will be using them dry. I'll tell you, they taste phenomenal. I could actually eat these as a snack. They are wonderful, but I think that they could easily go on hamburgers or in salads in that dry state to give a bit of crunch. The dehydrated ones are also really, really nice. A little bit more crunchy. But wonderful. It's important to remember that when foods are freeze-dried, because of the vacuum chamber and that it takes the temperature down to about between 20 and 30 below, and then uses heat to drive the moisture out, that the cellular structure in freeze-dried things stays intact. The cells do not collapse. But when things are done in the dehydrator, the food, as the moisture is driven out by heat, the cells do collapse down. And that's what makes them a little bit It takes a little bit longer to rehydrate foods that have been dehydrated, but we don't always need to rehydrate things if they're okay in the dried state. But I went ahead and I put some of the onions from each in these little bowls of very hot water, and they have been going for about 10 minutes. So I want Jim to come up close. These are the freeze-dried ones, and they float because the cellular structure is still in place. They're also disintegrating a little bit. You can see the pieces that are floating around. And some, because of the color of the water, they are losing their flavor to the water. So that's one reason why I don't think that I will be using these in a rehydrated situation. Here are the dehydrated ones, and they sink because their cellular structure has collapsed. But these, after 10 minutes, are very soft and pliable and could be used on a plate as caramelized onions in a wet form on hamburgers or whatever. Either of these could be used to make French onion soup, and just toss them right in the beef broth the way they are without rehydrating first, and they would be just fine. Although I do think the dehydrated would hold up a little bit better than these. One of the things that I did discover when drying the caramelized onions, if you remember, we used 1/4 of a cup of butter for the caramelized onions in each batch. And so as they dried and the moisture was driven out, it left a greasy touch to them. And they dried okay. They didn't feel really crispy dry the way a lot of foods do when they are dried because of the oil content that was still there. And because of that, I do believe that these we should count on having on our shelves only for about a year, because the butter will go rancid after that. And so we're going to be keeping these in the house so that they are there in front of us and we can use them. But I'm very, very pleased with how these turned out. These onions could also be rehydrated and caramelized. That wouldn't be a problem, as well as could the dehydrated ones. This is the results of our preserving 50 pounds of onions. Here are the bags that are hanging out in the garage. I have 5 of these with 7 onions in each of these bags. And then we have 2 2-quart jars of caramelized onions and a quart of dehydrated caramelized onions. These are freeze-dried. These 4 are freeze-dried from fresh, as these were also fresh rings in the dehydrator. We are very pleased with these and think that these will keep for a really, really long time. They had no oil. They were just fresh, and that was it. So this is very successful. I'm very pleased, and it will be a lot of fun to have fresh onions in these bags as well. So this completes our video on what you do with 50 pounds of onions, including how to caramelize them for an extra treat. So thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you very soon for more videos.